there's a very interesting book, The World of the Jinn and Shayateen by Sheikh Umar al-Ashkar. Is a very, very interesting book. It's probably one of the best books in the English language on the topic of the jinn. Probably the most comprehensive that I've come across. But what he mentions in his book is that, the shayateen have throughout history appeared to people in the form of men or other beings, and they have, deceived them or tried to deceive them in this manner. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, Ibn Taymiyyah mentions in the Essays on the Jinn, which is, again, a phenomenal read, and it really blows your mind when you read it. Yeah, it's a good read, and what you read there, I mean, it's mind blowing, because for example, I'll give you an example. He mentions that some of the Sufi sheikhs that were present at the time when Ibn Taymiyyah lived, they were visited by the jinn, and the jinn, in one part, he mentions that they were given a device by the jinn. Now, this was like something like a glass panel with water flowing over it. And through this device, they could communicate with the jinn, and they could receive information through this device and communicate with people in distant places. Now, it's very interesting when you read this description. I mean, it's very similar to the modern mobile phone, if you think about it. I mean, one could speculate that what's been mentioned, like a glass-like surface where information comes up and you can communicate with people at long distances and stuff like this. This was in Ibn Taymiyyah's time. He's mentioning this stuff. So these people were given these devices by the jinn. And this one point this highlights is that the jinn, you can say what we refer to as technology, that they possess their own forms of technology that they've shared with people. It seems like, at least from the accounts of Ibn Taymiyyah, with people throughout history. Obviously for something in return. And we know that the dealings with the jinn are never for the benefit of the human beings. Although, some of these so-called magicians may believe that they're really benefiting. At the end of it, they're going to lose, they lose out. But nevertheless, it's interesting that these devices are spoken about. He also mentions that some of these people, the jinn, would appear to some of these disciples of these sheikhs at the time. And they will see their sheikhs flying through the air, and see them when they were in trouble somewhere and to help them out, and then they'll return to the sheikh and say, you helped us out. Again, the jinn would have taken on the form of that Sufi sheikh at the time and appear to his disciples, just to, again, build up the credibility of this particular individual, etc. So we read of accounts of them appearing or taking on the form of men, of people, of animals. Snakes is a very common one. There's other narrations of them appearing in the form of snakes, which will, again, this is one I'm going to mention later on. But I guess the point here is I'm trying to emphasize is that a key concept in regards to the jinn is that they can take on different forms. They can take on physical forms. They can appear in the form of other people, and they can appear in the form of other animals or other creatures. It doesn't seem to be the preferred way of affecting human beings. Waswasa seems to be the main form, which everyone gets time and again. Whisperings of shaitan, where he whispers to you in his own voice, in your own mind, in your minds, and he affects you in that way. But time and again, you see that there is the appearance, shaitan or the evil jinn take on the form of people and appear to human beings for whatever reason. In the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam, when King Solomon, when God gave Solomon the control over the jinn, that they were referred to in the Quran as builders and divers. Allah refers to them as builders and divers. So they are specifically talked about, mentioned as builders. So we know that the jinn, at least some amongst them, have the ability to build. There are stories. So if you read The Intelligent World of the Jinn, the author in there, from Arab historical sources, the Arabs have mentioned the jinn to be master craftsmen. So, for example, one of the sources mentioned that the jinn would make swords, but they were unlike the swords of human swords. They were very special swords. They will not break, etc. They had very special properties, almost supernatural properties. So what's to say that, the swords of today, if you look at the swords of the time, the swords of today, you can say, are the fighter jets of today. So, I mean, if you want to outdo that technology, maybe they have greater technology than us. So, it's not a far stretch to assume that the jinn have their own forms of technology. Going back to Ibn Taymiyyah's case, the device that was given to those, the Sufi sheikhs, again, some form of technology. So it's not a stretch. Now, exactly how does that work? Are these crafts things that are built by the jinn and they're controlling them? Or could it be that jinn could take on the form of inanimate objects? Allah knows best. I don't know. It's just speculation, right? But there is a way of sort of bridging that gap. because there is that at least conceptual potential there that the jinn can make these types of things, and they seem to have throughout history outdone us from a technological perspective. They built things for Sulaiman alayhi salam, King Solomon, throughout history. There's accounts of them in Arab histories of building things and making things far superior to what humans have made. So it's not a stretch to say that they can outdo us today in our technology today. But if and when disclosure happens, the government officially comes out and gives a statement. The president comes out and says, yes, there are extraterrestrials amongst us, or whatever the case is, and they say they are extraterrestrials. It may not be the case that that's actually the case. Because remember, what we get from the government isn't necessarily always true. Now, I can see the reasons why a secular government may choose to go down the extraterrestrial route and use that as an official statement, as opposed to anything else that may be supernatural in nature. Because look, let's face it, extraterrestrials, biological creatures from another planet, is far more easily digestible than to refer to a supernatural being that's been present on Earth, far longer than we have and has been here, etc., etc. Although many are entertaining this idea as well now. I think it's an easier pill to swallow, and it's more in line with the sort of secular materialist narrative as well. But regardless, whichever way the coin falls, we have an explanation from an Islamic perspective. But what I would say is, if we really study it, the jinn hypothesis seems to be stronger currently as things stand. If you ask most people, have you had an experience in your life, a supernatural experience? I can bet most people, I would say probably 90% plus, would say yes. They've had some form of supernatural experience or unusual experience, even if they don't like the term supernatural. So it's, people are open to this stuff. And you see this with this, it's created a lot of fascination. A lot of people are interested in this, and a lot of people are looking for answers. And now, recently, over the past couple of months, people have started to look at what religions are saying. So Joe Rogan, for example, on one of his recent podcasts, he directly mentioned people that spoke to him and discussed the whole demons and angels explanation. But I think from an Islamic perspective, we have a far more comprehensive explanation, because it makes sense of many aspects of this phenomenon, not just one. And it seems like what people are witnessing today are things that people witnessed, have been witnessing throughout the centuries and throughout the ages. Yes, people have different names for these beings, like people do from different cultures. That's not surprising. But it's there in the Quran. There's a whole chapter on the jinn for anyone that's interested to read further. There's a surah called Surah Jinn, chapter called the jinn. And there are many other passages in the Quran that speak about the jinn. Surah Rahman, interestingly, is an address to both humans and to jinn. And we know at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there were at least 2 occasions where the Prophet, peace be upon him, directly gave dawah to the jinn and engaged with them. And at one point they became believers and they took the message back to their communities. So we know amongst the jinn, they are believing jinn, etc. And they may be jinn from different backgrounds with different abilities. So yeah, it's an interesting topic. And I think it's good for Muslims from that one, they learn more about the jinn. 2, that they have some options as far as hypotheses are concerned in regards to this phenomenon. Regardless of what's said about it, what the official statement is, there are options on the table, and we can make sense of this phenomenon either way. And from a non-Muslim perspective, I think it's interesting because it's a untapped area, even for researchers. They haven't looked into what Islam has to say in regards to this phenomenon. Very few have. Only one comes to mind, but the rest haven't. So it's an interesting avenue for non-Muslims to look into the Islamic tradition, especially in regards to this topic and the jinn.